Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and today I need to talk about former National Security Advisor John Bolton because his new book could cause irreparable damage to U.S. intelligence, and here's what's going on. Now, by now you probably have heard of Bolton's new book, The Room Where It Happened, and it basically is supposed to be a tell-all of his time in the President Trump administration and all of that. And I'm not going to get into the particulars or the salacious details or everything that have been leaked so far, because I want to focus on basically the cybersecurity, cyber warfare side of this, as well as intelligence. Now, what makes this book unusual, though, is that typically when an official in basically national security, as high as he was, when they write a book, it's usually years after their tenure, and this helps to ensure that no real current sensitive information is going to get out there and harm U.S. interests. And these books typically go through a very rigorous U.S. government vetting process to ensure that basically nothing out there is going to basically harm intelligence in the book. And we've got a different situation going on here, which I think is really interesting rather. Now, here's the information according to Cyberscoop. This book could actually reveal classified information and damage U.S. signals intelligence collected if it's published, and this is according to the National Security Agency's director, General Paul Nakasone. Now, he said this past Wednesday, and to quote him, "At the request of the National Security Council legal advisor, I have reviewed a limited portion of Bolton's draft manuscript and have identified classified information in that portion of the manuscript. Compromise of this information could result in the permanent loss of valuable SIGINT, or signals intelligence sources, and cause irreparable damage to the U.S. signal intelligence system." And I think that's something that's very important, because Nakasome's assessment of Bolton's book was filed this past Wednesday in the U.S. District Court in Washington alongside an emergency Justice Department filing seeking to actually block the release of this book. The Trump administration sued Bolton on Tuesday in an attempt to delay the publication of this, alleging that the book contained classified information and that Bolton had flouted his pre-publication review obligations with the government. Now, that said, the Bolton side of this said that the government was actually given this book and had taken longer to actually review it and get back to them than Bolton had actually taken to write it. And so there are both sides to that story. Now, General Nakasone did not detail what signals intelligence source or sources would be damaged, only noting that, and I quote, "significant manpower and monetary investments have been and continue to be made to enable and maintain this capability." Now, the NSA director also explained that the exposure of classified information, some of which was classified at the top secret or sensitive and compartmented information level, could also, and I quote, "cause considerable difficulties in U.S. and allied relations with specific nations," although he did not name them. Obviously, those parts of the book that have been leaked are not directly referencing this, and you can see a lot of late-night talk show hosts like Stephen Colbert and Jimmy Kimmel and some others that have taken these excerpts and actually talked about them at length, not to mention news shows. Everybody from CNN to Fox News and all of that are talking about this. But here's where this actually gets interesting, because today, Saturday, a federal judge rejected the Justice Department's emergency request to block the publication of John Bolton's book, and so as of now, it is moving forward. Now, U.S. District Judge Royce Lamberth of the District Court of the District of Columbia, denied the Trump administration's request for a restraining order on this book, which is basically set for publication this Tuesday, about 3 days from now, citing his publisher's declaration that more than 200,000 copies have already shipped for sale, not to mention the fact, as I've mentioned, we've seen late night talk show hosts and news people basically hold up a copy of the book saying, here's our advanced copy from the publisher, and obviously there are restrictions on what they can and cannot say about that book, but it gives them the time to prep reviews and analysis of books like this before they come out on Tuesday. But the judge also had some very serious misgivings here as well. So Judge Lamberth noted that it appeared Bolton failed to complete a pre-publication government review, as I mentioned previously, and get written authority that his manuscript contained no classified information before publishing. And to quote the judge, While Bolton's unilateral conduct raises grave national security concerns, the government has not established an injunction is an appropriate remedy. For reasons that hardly need to be stated, the court will not order nationwide seizure and destruction of a political memoir. And so here we are. What this book may be leaking may do harm to U.S. national interests in national security when it is released on Tuesday and the gloves come off all of the analysis that we will see on cable news shows 24 hours a day, not to mention all of the late night comedians and everything that I've just mentioned. And so I think it's something important that we really have to understand here, with this situation, is that while I'm sure the public has a very real interest to say, wow, this guy was, in the inner circle of the Trump administration, and I want to know every single detail, good, bad, and ugly. I don't care if you love or hate, President Trump or somewhere in between. A lot of people want to read this book, but at the same token, we also have to understand that there are security implications involved that could directly, precipitate something like a cyber attack or any other kind of attack against this country if information gets out there that possibly burns our ability to gather or collect any kind of information, whether it's electronic or otherwise. And so I think there's a balance that needs to be met here. I'm the first to admit that I'm also interested, in reading this book to get a better understanding of, let's say the inner workings, of our government and all of that, good, bad, and ugly. But I also have to take it with a grain of salt. And I am more than happy to, let's say, not read the book, if it gets delayed, because that will help us, let's say, resecure or change our methods and processes for intelligence, or even have the book go through, let's say, a scrubbing process. So while, let's say, salacious details are still left in, those that would directly affect, let's say, the men and women in our field that might be put in harm's way, is put out. So we'll see where this goes. I'm very curious to see what happens here, but it's looking like odds are this book is going to be published on Tuesday, and I have quite a feeling that this is going to be throwing hand grenades into the pool. I'm very curious to see the fallout from this, but that is your news for this Saturday, and we'll see what happens. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP, and please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe and stay online. Thanks, everyone.